Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into Rage, Bob Woodward's look at the Trump presidency.
Yeah, this one really got people talking when it hit the shelves.
I think a lot of folks heard about, like, the bombshell revelation.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But we wanted to, like, really dig into the book.
Absolutely.
So we've got excerpts. We've got Woodward's own notes to kind of, round things out.
Yeah. I think that really helps us get a fuller picture,
Yeah, and one of the things that, like, right away I was struck by was Woodward's access.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he had 18 interviews with President Trump himself.
It's pretty incredible, to hear his voice, like, directly unfiltered.
And woven in with that, Woodward brings in, like, meeting minutes and personal notes.
Oh, yeah, from major figures like Mattis, Tillerson.
You really get this this fly-on-the-wall perspective.
Yeah, you're right there in the room with him.
And the book starts with this, like, really chilling prologue.
Yeah.
It's January 2020.
Oh, okay.
And National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, he's giving Trump this stark warning.
About?
The coronavirus. He says it's going to be the biggest national security threat you face.
Wow. Talk about, like, foreshadowing.
Right. And this actually leads to one of the big, I think, themes in the book.
What's that?
It's this, like, disconnect between what the administration knew and the decisions they made.
Oh, interesting. So, like, this gap between information and action.
Yeah, exactly. And you see it, throughout the book, like the pandemic, North Korea, even the impeachment inquiry.
It's almost, like watching a train wreck in slow motion. You can't look away.
That's a great way to put it. And there's this one guy, Matt Pottinger,
Okay.
Deputy National Security Advisor.
Right.
He was working, like, frantically behind the scenes,
To do what?
trying to grasp the threat, the real threat
Yes.
of the virus.
So, like, what was he actually doing?
He was having, like, these secret phone calls with sources in China,
Oh.
trying to put together a picture that was far more alarming than what China was admitting publicly.
Like a real, like, spy thriller in the middle of this global health crisis.
And he uncovered three things about this virus that made it really dangerous.
What were they?
Easy human-to-human transmission, asymptomatic spread,
Yeah.
and the fact that it had already gone way beyond Wuhan.
So he's sounding the alarm, but is it reaching the president?
That's the big question, right? And
Yeah.
then to add to it, one of Pottinger's sources,
Yeah.
it was like this well-connected Chinese elite. He suggests that China might actually have a, quote, sinister goal.
Sinister goal. In what sense?
So the idea being that if China was the only one to suffer, economically they would be at a disadvantage.
So they wanted others to be hit by it, too.
Right. Now, Woodward makes it clear this is, like, just a suspicion,
Sure.
but it's a chilling thought, isn't it?
Absolutely. It really makes you think about trust and international relations.
Yeah. Like, during a global crisis, if countries can't even be honest with each other.
It could be catastrophic. Yeah, you're right.
And, this theme of, like, these hidden threats, it really runs throughout the book. There's actually this one quote from Trump. I keep coming back to it.
What is it?
He says, quote, "There's dynamite behind every door."
Wow. What a statement.
It's like a window into how he saw being president.
Yeah, it's like he felt under siege.
And you see it in his relationships with his advisors. Woodward does a great job with this.
Yeah. Who are we talking about here?
Guys like James Mattis, the Secretary of Defense.
Right.
Rex Tillerson, Secretary of State.
Seasoned guys.
They were trying to guide Trump, but he just resisted their advice.
Their expertise.
Yeah. Like, Mattis was a big believer in diplomacy.
Oh, okay.
Alliances, working together on the world stage.
Makes sense.
But Trump was all about trade deals.
Really?
Like, very transactional.
So, like, fundamentally different approaches.
And Tillerson.
Yeah.
Tillerson was worried about Russia, China.
Those are the big ones, yeah.
Long-term threats.
Well.
But Trump was, like, fixated on his relationships with Putin and Xi.
So, personal connections over, like, strategic concerns.
It's like they weren't even speaking the same language,
Oh, yeah. Totally different worldviews clashing.
And you can almost sense the frustration from these advisors.
Yeah, like they're hitting a wall.
And then there's the firing of James Comey.
The FBI director.
Woodward takes us through all the chaos.
I bet.
The back and forth, the fallout, and then eventually the Mueller investigation.
A huge turning point for sure.
And, speaking of pressure, you can't forget about the North Korea crisis.
Right.
Woodward details, like the negotiations, the threat of military action, North Korea's nukes. It's tense.
I bet.
And you feel this weight on Mattis's shoulders.
How so?
He's trying to prepare the military, just in case.
For a conflict with North Korea.
Yeah, while Trump is, doing his personal diplomacy with Kim Jong-un.
A high-stakes game of chicken.
Woodward quotes Dan Coates. He's the director of national intelligence.
Okay.
Coates said, quote, "We all knew we were on the road to conflict."
Wow. And did they actually come close to war?
Kim Jong-un told the CIA director, Mike Pompeo, that they, quote, "were very close."
Really?
And they never knew if it was real or a bluff.
So, like, right on the edge of a potential war?
And then, just as things seemed to be, like, calming down with North Korea,
Yeah.
the Mueller investigation heats up, which leads to impeachment.
Another bombshell.
Woodward really focuses on the Ukraine scandal. And he shows the political maneuvering, the division in the country.
It was a really, really partisan time.
And Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, he's a really interesting figure here.
What did he do?
He believed that by appointing Mueller, he'd actually made Trump, quote, "bulletproof" for the 2020 election.
He thought it would exonerate him.
Right. But obviously things didn't go that way.
No, they didn't.
And you also see William Barr, the Attorney General, becoming more influential.
And how did the Democrats view him?
They accused him of being, like, Trump's personal lawyer, not impartial at all.
It's like that line between loyalty and responsibility was getting blurred.
Yeah, and that blurring gets, like, even more pronounced when the pandemic hits.
Right, because then it was a full-blown crisis.
Woodward goes through the administration's response, from downplaying the virus at the start to all the chaos behind the scenes.
Like, they were trying to present a united front.
But behind the scenes, it was all infighting and panic.
As the situation got worse and worse.
And here's a crazy stat. Woodward found that 20% of Trump's own staff felt they were, quote, "saving the world" from the president.
Wow. 20%? That's a lot.
And then in all this, you have Jared Kushner operating behind the scenes,
Oh.
trying to control things.
Like a Shakespearean tragedy, a nation in crisis, led by a president who seems completely detached.
And right as the pandemic peaks, there's another crisis.
What was that?
The protests after George Floyd's murder.
Right. 2020 was a whirlwind.
And this is where Woodward's access really pays off.
In what way?
He captures Trump's reactions,
Yeah.
his conversations with people like Lindsey Graham,
Oh, interesting.
his focus on projecting this law and order image.
Even as the country's grappling with racial injustice.
You really see Trump's worldview,
Yeah.
his priorities. It's like he's disconnected from millions of Americans.
And this is highlighted by one of the most shocking things in the book.
What's that?
Trump repeatedly said he'd, quote, done more for the black community than any other president other than Abraham Lincoln.
Wow. That's
It's a bold claim.
it really makes you think about, like, truth, history,
Mm.
empathy even.
There's a lot to unpack there, for sure.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
There's so much more to discuss. All these anecdotes, the inner workings of how decisions were made, the personalities.
It's a fascinating study of leadership, or maybe the lack of it.
Which brings us back to the title, Rage. You know, Woodward doesn't shy away from showing the anger that, like, surrounded Trump. Yeah, it kind of jumps off the page. Like, you can almost feel the heat.
When he's ranting about, his enemies,
Yeah.
the media, anyone who questioned him.
But I think Woodward is getting at something deeper, too.
Yeah, what do you mean?
Like, there's this underlying rage almost that comes from insecurity, feeling attacked, fear of losing control.
It wasn't just directed at, like, his opponents.
No.
Woodward talks about how Trump would turn on his own allies,
Yeah.
berate them, belittle them,
Demanding this absolute loyalty.
even when it, like, went against their own principles.
It's a pattern you see throughout the book, this transactional, distrustful way of leading.
Like in Trump's world, if he was winning, someone else had to be losing.
Exactly. And this brings us to, like, some of the bigger questions Woodward raises.
Yeah, in the epilogue, he asks, what does rage tell us about power and leadership today?
What can we learn from this wild period in American history?
All questions.
And I think each reader, they're going to have to wrestle with those on their own.
But it's clear rage is, a vital piece of history.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a firsthand look at this presidency, this reminder about the importance of, like, speaking truth to power.
And being vigilant, thinking critically.
It's a book that, like, it stays with you.
Yeah, it does.
Challenges what you thought you knew, makes you face these uncomfortable truths.
Makes you really think about the future of American democracy.
In a world that feels, so divided, so uncertain.
Whether you like Trump or not, this book, it's essential reading.
To understand what's shaping the world today, The challenges we're all facing.
The power of, the human story, even the messy parts.
One thing that really got to me was how Woodward uses these tiny details.
Oh, like what?
He describes how Trump would pace around the Oval Office during phone calls, or fidget with his Diet Coke can while talking to advisors.
It's funny, those little things, they really bring him to life.
Yeah, they humanize him. And it makes the book so gripping.
It's not just dates and names.
It's about people, their motivations, their flaws, what happens because of their choices.
It's like you're right there with them watching history happen.
And it's not even the big moments. It's the quiet ones that tell you the most.
Give me an example.
Woodward writes about how Trump would constantly ask aides to read him flattering news articles.
Oh, wow.
Or how he'd obsess over, the size of the crowd at his inauguration.
Little things like that can be so revealing.
Yeah. And on their own, they might seem meaningless. But together, they paint this picture of a man who's deeply insecure.
Obsessed with his image.
Always needing, reassurance.
And that insecurity, that need for validation, it seems to drive so many of his decisions.
It's like he's always trying to prove himself. Silence the critics. Create this story's success, even when it doesn't match reality.
Which takes us back to rage, right?
Yeah.
The rage, the anger, it's almost like a shield.
To deflect criticism.
To project strength.
To avoid being held accountable.
And often it's turned on the people closest to him. His advisors, family, even supporters.
It's this toxic energy that just seeps into everything.
Reading it, you get caught up in all the drama, the intrigue.
But there's also this feeling of exhaustion.
Like you're just waiting for a moment of peace. But it never comes.
Rage really captures the emotional toll of the Trump presidency, not just on the country, but on the people around him.
And on Trump himself.
You finish the book, and you're drained.
Nah.
Disturbed, even. But also kind of exhilarated.
Like you've been through something intense.
Yeah, like you've journeyed into the heart of American power and come out with a better understanding of who we are. And it makes you think about, what does it even take to lead a country?
Especially in times like these when everything feels so divided.
Rage is one of those books that it'll stick with you. It makes you think. It makes you feel.
It might even make you question, everything you thought about American politics.
I know I did. It definitely challenges the idea that there's, one single truth.
Oh, yeah. It shows how subjective things can be, especially in politics, where, perception and spin, they often matter more than facts.
Reading Rage was getting this behind-the-scenes look at power. The emotions, the strategies, how messy decisions actually get made.
And it makes everyone involved seem more human. The powerful people and the people around them.
You see their weaknesses, their goals, their good sides and bad sides.
And it reminds you that even these huge events, they're still just the result of choices that people made.
If you want a book that's going to make you think, challenge you, maybe even make you a little uncomfortable, Rage is worth a read.
It'll get people talking, that's for sure. It'll spark debates, leave you with more questions than answers.
And in a world that feels so confusing, so polarized, maybe those are the questions we need to be asking.
Maybe. So that wraps up our deep dive into Bob Woodward's Rage. We've covered the main points, the shocking parts.
We went deep, but honestly, we've only scratched the surface. This is a book you really have to read yourself. Talk about it. Debate it.
It'll challenge what you believe, it'll give you a new perspective on things, and it makes you realize how complex power is, how complex leadership is, and how complex people are.
So we encourage you to go check it out. Read it, form your own opinions, and as always, let us know what you think. Join the conversation online. Share your insights. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those tough questions.